you can be somebody with a lot of money and influence. If you don't have enough awareness, people with more awareness can just manipulate you to do whatever you want and basically use that money and influence through you.
Like a difference between being critical and actually thinking about what they're doing versus just like writing people off.
These people in power, definitely we should be critical of them because they have a lot of influence.
Yeah.
If you're so critical of them, then you're not providing a very good environment for good people to rise to those positions or for them to try to stay good-natured. People tend to criticize people in power, and I think that this makes a lot of sense because it's like, if you think about it, people in power have the most influence, and so their actions have the most consequence on us. So obviously then, well, you know, we're going to be more critical about like, okay,
Their actions.
Is what they're doing good? Is this helpful? And is this damaging? But at the same time, I think that power can kind of be misunderstood. And I think that, you know, in some cases, maybe we're kind of redefining power in some ways, you know, in a different sort of way than people might think about it. Because I think that from the outside, power can seem like freedom and can seem very like freeing of like, oh, then I have this power and I can just like do whatever I want with it. But I think that real power that comes from awareness is one that can oftentimes lead to what can seem constraining from the perspective of that person in power if they start to feel kind of the responsibility that corresponds with it. So maybe I can kind of take a step back in the sense of like, what I mean by awareness is basically the more kind of awareness and like that comes from the knowledge and wisdom that you have about the world, the more you can kind of just get power naturally and easily, kind of however you might want, you know, whether that's, you know, human capital by building relationships, if you have awareness about human nature and the kinds of things that you want to do. And
so you're making the point that knowledge is power,
right?
You know, sort of expanding on that.
Yeah. So you know, that's saying, and I do think it's very much true, but I think it's like, you know, there's like knowledge, and then in Peaceful Warrior, Socrates defines wisdom as doing. It's basically like, then applied knowledge is wisdom, and I think that okay, like knowledge and wisdom, I guess you can say, is like, then that's what kind of gives you that awareness. Right. And so then if you know more about the world, you're gonna know ways to like make money if that's what you want, and that's, you know, what and that's a way in which you can, like, I guess, increase your power or something like that,
so, you know? I guess knowledge it might be like power's potential for power, and then, well, if you have knowledge, then I guess then you can create a lot of power, and you can have a lot of power from that.
Yeah, well, I think that there's something to be said. I mean, like, if you're talking about in actualized terms, like, people will say like power is if somebody has a lot of money, then they're more powerful. They have a lot more influence and they're powerful. But if somebody has the capacity to generate money and generate influence, I would say that that's just as powerful. It's just harder to measure, and so people don't. And then there's also like a discount on the uncertainty of the future, and like you can't know exactly how that's going to come about.
Reminds me of the scene in Game of Thrones where Littlefinger's like, knowledge is power or something. You remember? He was with Cersei, and he was basically saying like, knowledge is power, like secrets is power, because obviously he knew all the knowledge and
everything
secrets
that was going on, and she had all this gold, supposedly, right?
She had these like soldiers right there.
Oh yeah,
and she was like, and then she was just like, okay, take him. And then, like, the soldier took it, was, like, about to slit his throat. And then she was like, no, stop, I changed my mind. It's basically iterating the point,
and then
like,
she was like,
I have soldiers.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and then she just told him, power is power. And it's like, okay. And I think what the reason why I emphasize awareness over things like money and influence is like somebody can come across money and influence based on circumstance. If you talk about like, you know, if somebody just inherits money from their parents or something like that, like, okay, sure, then you have that money, but that's something where I think people can overvalue that over the skill of just knowing, like,
over like the potential.
Yeah. And I think that the ability to, I think that awareness should be, is way, way, way more important and way, way, way more powerful, because it's like, okay, somebody can have money, but if they don't know what to do with it to actually make any real change, they're just sitting there with money, you know. It's like, that's fine.
Like, look at my money.
Yeah, you've got security, but are you a really powerful person? I don't think so. You know, I think it's about like, what is that mechanism? And that mechanism of awareness, I think, is what really to me at least is what I see as like, okay, this is a powerful person, you know, because it's like, you can be somebody with a lot of money and influence. If you don't have enough awareness, people with more awareness can just manipulate you to do whatever you want and basically use that money and influence through you. You know, it's like, that's not really being a very powerful person in that sense.
Usually,
you know?
What people think of like when I think of like powerful people, in terms like in the general sense of like, there's like powerful people of like like behind the scenes and like making things happen,
right?
But then there's also like people with power, you know, when you think of like power is like, I don't know why, but the image of like a giant fist pops into my head, where it's like at the say of a word, they can like squash people's lives or like raise them up, and like usually those are people with like a lot of attention, and like a lot of people that like really that like do what they say, or like one person that comes into mind is kind of obviously Elon Musk, where it's like he has a lot of attention, and then he has a lot of money, and then he has a lot of businesses and just generally a lot of influence. He also has a lot of haters and a lot of supporters, and so like a lot of publicity.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of started out talking about like how we like to you know, criticize people in power, and
if you have a lot of publicity, then it makes it easier for a lot of people to criticize you.
Yeah, but I think that Elon Musk is an interesting example, because we first discovered him, I might like 2018, 2019, when our dad was first investing in Tesla, and we were like obsessed with Elon Musk, and we were like big supporters, because it's like, oh yeah, electric vehicles, this is great. And then and during that time, people were like calling him crazy and like being, you know, not like super supportive of him when he's like trying to make these electric vehicles. And I think that and so we were big supporters of him at the time.
There's like a video of me of climbing into a Tesla trunk, because obviously
Elon actually liked the tweet of you going, the Tesla trunk girl went viral, and that was you when you were like 6 years old.
I got like a bunch of like views and likes and stuff, because obviously a Tesla doesn't have an engine, so it's got like a huge trunk, so you were climbing into a little pocket of the trunk.
You were demonstrating the size of the trunk by going in there, and so so that was kind of how we first...
That should speak for itself as to how much of a fan we were of Elon Musk.
But then kind of recently, I think that some of those experiences, like I think that you can definitely, when you're being scrutinized publicly all the time, when you're, you know, just trying to do something good, I think you can become very kind of, you know, just bitter and like, oh, like what's going on, and not have as much like, you know, compassion for people. Which I think is understandable, but at the same time, I think we've been not a big fan of how Elon has been acting recently, and just kind of, you know,
that's kind of an understatement. I mean, he's said a lot of like very bad things, to put it lightly, you know.
And just you know, just being immature in terms of like, you know, name calling, and just like, you know, throwing his power around, which he obviously has a lot, without really
big fist,
without thinking that you need some kind of accountability, because it's like, obviously it's like, okay, yeah, people are not perfect, and there are plenty of people saying bad things that are, those bad things aren't warranted or accurate. But at the same time, it's like, you still need to be able to have a mechanism for feedback, and oftentimes when you become so powerful, you get very isolated. And I think part of the reason why is because I think that sometimes the hypercritical nature that we have in our culture, that towards those people with power, can actually be a vicious cycle, because then these people in power, who are just human beings and trying to do the best thing that they can think to do, then see, oh, these people are all being critical, and then they start to isolate themselves, and then it's really hard to relate to other people who don't necessarily see how much it can be difficult having so much power because of the responsibility that comes with it. And I think that can make somebody go crazy, like, no joke. So
at like a small scale level, it's something that comes to mind, since it that is like, with like, it's hard for a student to sympathize with a teacher as to how hard it is for a teacher to deal with all of these students and try and keep it from getting into conflicts and all that. And it's like, it's just a very different perspective on the same situation of like teacher and students. But it's just like, but with the teacher, they're seeing everyone and they're trying to help everyone.
And when it comes to these people in power, then I think that people will get the causality wrong when you see that, like, oh, like, there's just a way higher rate of sociopaths that are CEOs, or that are politicians. And it's like, okay, is that just because they're just trying to do bad things, or is it that the going into an environment in which you're constantly being criticized is one that wards off those who are actually more sensitive to what people are saying about them, right? It's like, if you are like, more influenced by people putting negative comments about you, you're not going to become a politician.
You're not going to want to go out there for even more people to start hating on you.
So at the same time, these people in power are like, definitely we should be critical of them because they have a lot of influence. If you're so critical of them, then you're not providing a very good environment for good people to rise to those positions, or for them to try to stay good people and stay good-natured towards people if they're being constantly criticized by them.
Well, there's like a difference between being critical and like actually thinking about what they're doing versus just like writing people off and like hating on every single thing they're doing based on like whether or not you've written them off versus actually taking into account and trying to think about what they're actually saying. So I think that's what might be happening, is like based on different things, like maybe political views or religious views or whatever. You're sort of like putting people into buckets, and then you're putting their statements and what they say along with them, versus actually considering those statements and the specific things that they're doing.
Well, and then the context of their lives and who they are as human beings. And I think that part of it is that there's kind of this progression of one's power and in terms of awareness, and then how that actually influences your own perception of power. Because I think for those who might have like low awareness or like low like material sorts of power, like wealth or influence,
the sort of things you'll think about,
then you might kind of idealize what that actually is in terms of like, oh, like if I had these things and I would just make everything better, as if the people who have those things aren't trying to make things better, and that it's just really complicated and really hard. And then when it comes to, I think that there's kind of like a mid-tier level of power that can be really, really healthy in terms of you have the power to impact people and you see that responsibility, and then you take that responsibility to help other people, and you get that feedback loop in the sense that, you know, you're helping individuals in your own life, and you have the ability to just be a really positive influence on those around you, and that leads to a lot of meaning. I think that people can think about like, okay, there's this having responsibility due to your awareness and your power is a burden, but at the same time, that's what gives you meaning in life, right? And so I think that when you're doing that on a more local level in terms of people in your own life, that's when I think you can feel the most sort of meaning and that kind of impact in real people. But at the same time, you then also have those who are in power that are you know, very powerful in a global sense in terms of impacting millions of people,
like Elon Musk.
Yeah. And I think that this can become really difficult because they don't see all the people that they're impacting, and it can be hard to derive meaning from, okay, theoretically I'm helping the world by providing my product that people are buying, but at the same time you're not seeing the faces of your customers and how it's actually improving the day-to-day life. You don't have the counterfactual of like how many lives were saved with this or that, or even the quantification of like what that value actually is. So I think that because with this leveraged effect of digital tools on power and allowing like singular individuals to have massive influence and massive wealth, that creates this kind of you know, people call it like an imbalance, but I mean, I think that there's definitely an imbalance, but then there's also the reality that, you know, if you create something like Amazon that's just super, super valuable and that everybody is using and is making people's lives way better, then you are going to have a singular individual that is getting that leveraged effect because of the nature of digital, you know, of
just
things
value like, too.
Yeah, of digital tools, of scalable value. Yeah. Right? That's the real thing that changes, that now we have scalable value. But at the same time,
kind of talking about like with Bo Burnham, we were saying sort of the same thing.
Yeah,
where it's like he's like saying like, oh, I'm getting all this money for being the center of attention and being on stage and making jokes.
Right.
And it's like, but the reason why is because he's creating something that so many people enjoy and can get value from.
But I think it's really hard for people in those positions to have a good feedback loop, because how are they supposed to get feedback from the millions of customers and know what to actually do with all of that? And at the same time, because there's so few of those individuals, they don't really have a lot of people that they can actually relate to. And so I think that oftentimes those people become very isolated. And we were apparently the CEO of Airbnb was like going to college was going to night school, and he was being, I guess, Barack Obama was teaching there, and like Obama was giving him some advice on like, here's how, you know, here's how you can solve the fact that becoming more powerful as a person can lead to isolation. And it's like, there's like, you know, I think a lot of people who start to rise in power in that way, in that scalable way, where they are kind of disconnected from the people that they're impacting, can start to be very isolated, and then that leads to them not being able to make the best decisions.
Yeah,
you know?
Well, people will say, if you're defining power as awareness, and then you're defining, you know, bliss as ignorance,
right?
Then, well, you know, then you might not get people who are super happy that have like a ton of awareness. Although I think there are some problems with the ignorance is bliss thing.
Right.
I think the way you maximize meaning and happiness is by what you were talking about with like the mid-level tier.
I think if you're thinking about what's probably the most mentally and emotionally healthy, it's more of that local, like, because that's what we did forever. You know, people, you know, you had like the cobblers, and they were serving people in their community that were their neighbors,
and people in their community.
You gave them the thing that you made, and they were like, oh wow,
and they were wearing your shoes if you're a cobbler.
You know, and so I think that is definitely if you're thinking about maximizing mental and emotional health as well as meaning, it's like, yeah, like that's great. But at the same time, there is definitely a lot of opportunity for providing scalable value, which will result in, you know, a potential feeling or risk of disconnection from the people that you're serving, and that kind of disembodied, okay, I'm helping people, but like I don't really feel that.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sort of like seeing that with like I have like a favorite. Some of like my favorite YouTubers have been like one of my favorite YouTubers has just like kind of ghosted her channel.
Right.
And it's made me very sad. You know, it's always a very sad experience when your favorite YouTuber just like stops posting.
Yeah.
Just like, or just like quits. Like, I don't know if she's quit, but like just quits without like saying anything.
Right.
And I think it's because like it's, when you're starting out, it can be definitely very exciting to have like all these fans, but that's going to get old.
Yeah.
And then you're just going to have all these people that you're not actually talking to.
Yeah.
You're not engaged. You're not seeing how you're not really seeing how what you're doing is adding value to their life. So if you're not having that feedback loop,
it's really hard to keep motivation.
It's very hard to keep motivation. Like, we were speculating as to why this is happening. I don't know if that was happening. Right. There might be something totally different going on with her.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's one very possible reason.
Yeah. And when it comes to like the ignorance is bliss, I think it's like when you're ignorant, you don't feel beholden to anybody else. It's really easy to be selfish when you're ignorant. Yeah. But if you actually do have awareness, you see all the ways in which you can help people. And if you choose not to do those things, you know that you're neglecting that responsibility.
Yeah, and then it's like, well, there's all these people that I could have helped with this.
Yeah.
So what? Am I just not going to do that because I don't like feel like doing it? Like there's all this positive potential that could happen from me sharing what I know.
Yeah, and so I think, and that's also kind of a virtuous cycle, but at the same time, it can kind of not feel that way, in the sense that like then if you feel the ways in which like I am responsible because I have the power to do good things, and you'll do those good things and you'll become more powerful in the process, and then it's like, okay, then you feel even more responsibility. And so it's like, yeah, there's a lot of ways in which people can grow power and responsibility, and like kind of alongside that, if you're thinking about power in the sense of awareness, and I think that that's a really, really great thing, because that's how you find meaning in your life. But at the same time, it's like, okay, then you're still have this bigger and bigger burden, because you're just a lot more aware of the people around you and how you're actually impacting them and the ways in which you can help. And then how are you supposed to not help, you know, if you're in that position? And I think that that's a question that I think needs to be answered in a way that's adapted to a digital age, in which you can impact so many more people than you did before.
And just keep growing your influence.
Yeah, and then there's like, you know, 8 billion people, you know, it's
hanging on your every word.
Right. And it's like, maybe not, but it's still like, you know, you can, even if you're somebody that's only, you know, helping those in your family, now you have the knowledge that you could take that and influence, you know, not only just like your neighbors and then your local community and then your state and then your country, but then the whole world.
And even if you're not like really feeling this or relating this right now, it is something that is going to be, I think, increasingly more people are going to like start to do this and realize this because of these digital tools. It's become really easy and really great. Like everyone, like most people have put something out, you know, in terms of like a little short, a little video, shared something that had reached more people than if we had been living without digital tools. And it's just something that more people are going to do. And we want to be able to contend with that question, because that question is something that everyone's going to need to face.